Morning, everyone. We're about to get started. The title of the presentation is the Updated Magic Bus. It's currently at version 4.1.2. And this presentation will embody the technical features of the GS9, which is the source unit made by Sony. And it will also discuss some of the updates that were implemented to the Magic Bus. If you have questions, please hold them to the end for the question and answer period. And we'll try to get through the presentation in about 45 minutes, which would leave 15 minutes for questions and answers. So before I get going on the presentation, most of you know Hiro-san and Yuki-san, and it's a great honor to be associated with Sony and to know them. They're wonderful to work with. And to start off the presentation, I thought I would share a cute little introduction.
Hiro-san, Yuki-san. We wish that we were there with you this year making music, and we hope you have an amazing show with our friend John.
Hey, Yuki-san, Hiro-san.
Do the beatbox. Do a beatbox on me.
Yeah.
Getting tired.
Anyway, that was Jamie Shadowlight from San Diego, and last year she played the violin into the Magic Bus through the Magic Bus's audio system. And you can tell she's silly, and we had great fun. And I thought it would be a great way for to introduce Hiro and Yuki-san and get going with the presentation. This is Hiro-san autographing the back Helmholtz panel on the Magic Bus. Hiro-san is here with me, and he's going to discuss the technical features of the GS9. Something happened yesterday that we didn't know about. The GS9 won an Elfie Award for technical innovation. So we're super excited to have a car audio product win an award at a home audio show. And that speaks volumes for Hiro's incredible design capabilities. So I would like to introduce Hiro-san to talk about the GS9.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are you today? Good. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, John-san. And my name is Hiro Hayashi from Sony. So this time I came from Japan to join this great show. And also, it's just a great honor to be here to give the presentation to all of you. So I'm so appreciate it. So thank you for having the time here today. And I'm the leader engineer of RSX GS9 now, just while before the Johnson explained. So today I'd like to give a little bit about the technical information about RSX GS9 car high-end, high-resolution digital media player. This is the first time. So at first, I'd like to explain about the RSX GS9 features and then advanced technology. And this, why the GS9 gives the ultimate listening pleasure is the digital audio converter IC, which is called, name is at the top ES90, ES9018S. Have you ever heard of this digital audio converter IC before? Anybody? Are you? Yeah. This is a kind of the famous, the most advanced digital audio converter IC, which is used for high-end, especially home audio high-end component. So this digital audio converter IC is an industry-leading IC, which gives the optimum sound quality for. Then also the GS9 is the first car digital media player to use this digital IC. This IC is supplied from ESS. This is located in the United States as well. And another key device, which gives the RSHX9 the listening pleasure, is Muses 8920E. This is a kind of operational amplifier. This is supplied from JRC. JRC is a Japanese radio communication company. This is a kind of famous. So they developed the operational amplifier, especially for high-end audio components. So, and then ES9018S and Muses 8920E, both of the ICs that gives the present sound quality to RSHS9. This is the main key technologies, the devices. And also, I like to say about the third one, the Sony capacitor, audio capacitors. So GS9 uses Sony audio capacitors, which is still developed to dedicate the audio file. So this audio capacitor gives the bright, like a character and a depth to the sound quality of the RSHS9. And next is the flexible operation. And what makes great, and also I wanted to really add the RSHS9 is the native DSD playback. You know, all of you, I think, what is the native DSD playback, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I think I really wanted to design the car high-end, high-res digital media player with the functionality of native DSD playback. So finally, we achieved the native DSD playback, and then so GS9 has the USB micro B port here. It's a kind of so small ones, excuse me. So this port has the RSHS9 has the functionality of USB DAC. So if you have the high resolution contents in the smartphones and any Walkman from Sony, and you can send the digital data via USB to send the data to RSHS9 and then play DSD data as native, not convert to anything. This is a great thing. And another great thing, so now GS9 can play DSD 2.8 and 5.6, and the last April we have released a new firmware to the customers in the product market, and that firmware has the new function of playback of DSD to 11.2. This is a great thing. This is the world first time to get the car media player. And the next is the PCM playback. So not only DSD, but also PCM, RSHS9 can play up to frequency band is the 352 and also 32-bit compatibility. And as I mentioned, this GS9 accepts the DSP DAC sources, and it supports multiple high resolution formats. For instance, let's say, this RSHS9 has not only USB micro B port as USB DAC function, but also USB Type A port. So Type A port can play almost everything about high resolution contents like wave and a FLAC and AIFF from Apple and ALAC from Apple. The ALAC and a FLAC is the kind of lossy, compressed audio. It's like almost, generally speaking, almost like a file size the half of the not compressed audio file if I compare to WAV file. Then also, GS9 can play a DSD. I think there are two kinds of DSD files. One of them is a DSF, and also the other is DSD IFF. Sometimes people say DIFF. So all of the GS9 can play two kinds of DSD files, DSF and DIFF. Yep. And then next one is the refined design. And the GS9 uses a fully aluminum front panel here, and also at back side, this is the first time for Sony car audio section to use the 1.6 millimeter thick chassis. This thick chassis is a kind of 2 times as well as other car CD head unit. Generally, other car CD head unit uses 0.8 millimeter chassis. So this is a kind of double thickness. and also high stable structure due to thickness. And also aluminum front panel is the fully aluminum with beautiful design. And also middle of the front panel, there's the precision encoder. This is the makes like every touch, you can feel the firm, like a smooth movement, like silk. Let's say like I do say like silk. So we got the demonstration car at the Sony booth, near the Sony booth, and of course the Magic Bus and Johnson's Magic Bus. So if you have any chance, please come over to our booth and please feel this kind of silky movement. Yeah. The next one is the, I like to talk about a little bit the digital audio converter. And all music files in digital form must be converted into analog signals, as you know, in order to be heard through speakers. So that's why for all digital audio players, it's kind of important to what kind of digital audio converter to be used. And also this digital audio converter highly affects to sound quality. So, and as I mentioned, this, GS9 uses ES9018S. So this device itself, this IC is a THD is 120 dB, and also DNR is 135. So maybe I think this session you have like maybe audio file is it together. So I think at that time we have started to develop this RSX GS9 almost 3 years ago at the beginning of 2014. So now ESS like a supply the new high-end 9038 Pro. You know, somebody I think you know. But that time is 9018S is the highest DAC. So this is the highest specification that in the audio industry. And this IC gives the bright character and the fine details. Let's say like we can feel more like space and fine details. And sometimes we can imagine in the like kind of how like a vocal like sing a song with the how open their mouth or something. So this is a kind of fine detail. So this is a great DAC too. And also together with equipped with this digital audio converter IC, we carefully chose of the jitter canceling clock. So we used, I didn't mention about, we used the 80 megahertz clock. This is the kind of highest one. So this is the highly affect the sound quality as well. And the next one is the high resolution playback. And as I mentioned, this RSX GS9 have the wide variety and a playback style, and a USB DAC and a USB thumb drive playback, and also DSD. This DSD stands for digital through digital. So before I mentioned this head unit can play through via USB DAC and a DSD up to 11.2 megahertz, and also PCM is 352, 32-bit. So what makes great is that this is native playback and also multiple format, as I mentioned. And with no exception for Sony audio products, we add the Sony specific sound engine, call them as DSE-HX. DSE-HX stands for Digital Sound Enhancement Engine. HX. This what this engine is like. I think high resolution industry is now expanding gradually more and more in the United States or other areas, but especially teenagers or mainly the people, they use still like a compressed audio, for instance MP3 or AAC. I think this engine can upscale those compressed file, let's say like MP3 or AAC file, upscale to high resolution frequency band and the bit depth area. And then if we play MP3 file, still, this head unit can play MP3 file by 192K and 24 bits. This is a great sound. If you, even you play the MP3 file, you can feel and you can listen to that song like high resolution. So please, one more time I say demonstration car. Please come over, please. Demonstration car and a magic bus, and you feel, oh, this is a kind of MP3. Are you sure something? So please feel that come over our booth. This is a great sound engine. And then this is a kind of another Sony exclusive technology. So with no exception, especially for Sony audio products, we add the function called them as LDAC. LDAC is the wireless high transmission technology via Bluetooth. So Bluetooth technology, current Bluetooth technology, let's say like aptX or SBC. SBC stands for sideband coding. So this transmission rate is the maximum, almost around 320 around. But our technology, LDAC, can transmit the data almost 3 times as well as current Bluetooth technology. A maximum is a 990 kbps. So almost 3 times. So it almost close to high resolution sound quality. So please, please prepare the what LDAC compatibility source devices like Sony products like a Walkman. And luckily, within this year, Google, they have announced about the next generation operation system, Android OS. They are going to add the LDAC technology as authorized Android OS audio transmission. So in the future, we can easily find the Android smartphone devices with LDAC transmission technology. So please remind that this is a kind of great technology. And this next one is a refined design. And the GS9 front panel is a fully machine cut, a solid aluminum and stuff, and forming a 14 millimeters single shell design. And also all over the front panel, a hairline is given to all the surface, even circumference, outer circumference, and also black anodized coating is attached to all the front panel. This is the kind of bright character and the fine details about the new design, fully aluminum panel. So next one is the this is a structure of the RX GS9 for super sound quality. It is really important to have the high rigidity in chassis as well as controlling electromagnetic interference. So to meet both of requirements, so we have decided to add the 2-storied chassis structures are adopted. So the first floor is the analog PWB, this process. This PWB can process analog signals, all analog signals. So these are digital signals. So we carefully design and develop to sometimes this diesel like a signal process area can become like a noise sources to give the bad effect to analog signal. So this diesel like a board carefully and sealed it with this chassis and carefully sealed it. Almost nothing digital data comes from to the analog PWB. This is a kind of 2-story chassis structure. And also what makes another thing we carefully choose is that this analog board and the digital board are connected by cable. So, but we carefully choose this cable is almost 60 pins. The cables here, and we carefully cable them. Like every single cable is sealed. We chose like a coaxial cable. So this coaxial cable is one maybe some of them you know that coaxial cable is inside the signal, and all signal is covered by sealed and ground. So which means that no negative transmission, digital transmission from the signal is internal the signal from to the other. So this is a kind of technical to improve the sound quality for RSXGS9. Yeah, this is all. Yeah, thank you very much for listening. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hiro-san. As many of you have known, the Magic Bus was had another source unit in it, and it was quite a revelation to hear the result of all of these technical innovations in the bus, and it has truly taken it to another level. And I sincerely applaud your passion for taking car audio to the highest level and making a source unit that I've always dreamed of having in the bus. So thank you very much. So I'll get on with so what's new about the bus? I call it now 4.1.2. So the fourth iteration is basically the hardware. So in this case for the bus, we have a new digital signal processor, and it is made by Helix, and it's called the DSP Pro Mark II, and it features 96 kilohertz 32-bit processing and a ton of parametric equalization and time alignment and other wonderful things. I'll get to that in a minute. And the 0.1 implies a firmware update, and that features the new version 12 firmware released by Sony last April, I believe it was, which to me represented also an improvement in sound quality as well, not to mention the ability to play 11.2 DSD. And then the 0.2 is the last digit, which represents an updated tune. So as you know, the bus continues to strive for improved sound, and I'll talk more about that later. But principally, we're very happy to be featuring the release of 11.2 DSD played in the car for the first time in North America. So we're very excited about that. And the 11.2, many of you may have been into Fiona Joy's album release party yesterday, so you got to hear this beautiful rendition of the 11.2 DSD with her new album, Into the Mist. And if you don't have it, I encourage many of you to acquire it. We were also listening to Valerie Joyce's album yesterday in 5.6. Well, all I had was 5.6, but I'll be sure to get the 11.2. And that was very, very exciting. So the design philosophy is, of course, focusing on the acoustical performance of the room. That's why the bus is so big. It basically gave me the opportunity to have a reverberation time that is more favorable compared to cars, and I'll discuss more of that later. The purpose of the bus also is now in collaboration with Sony, which is wonderful, is to drive the mobile audio industry in a state-of-the-art manner, pushing the limits at all times to striving for what is maximally possible in the mobile environment. And finally, there are some special attributes of the bus, firsts, if you will. It's the first vehicle to employ basically the largest internal volume. When I got the Sprinter van in 2004, it had about 625 cubic feet of internal volume. It was the largest vehicle available at the time. The newer Sprinter vans now have more volume, and we now have Ford Transit vans and other, basically vans have really taken off in the United States, and they would also make wonderful platforms for acoustical reasons. Again, we also paid attention to the room dimensions and attempted, it turned out that the bus distributed room resonances very favorably. Many of this was in my previous presentation last year, so I'm going to skim over it quickly. We also focused on appropriate loudspeaker placement. The subwoofer, for instance, is placed in the rear in the middle of the van, and it puts it at an acoustical null at 102 hertz, so that placement in effect acts as a low-pass filter for the subwoofer, which was completely intentional, because any sound from 100 hertz would be audible from the rear, and I didn't want that. I wanted the subwoofer to disappear and blend into the front soundstage as much as possible. Then there are tuned absorptive elements, Helmholtz absorbers, and then there's a whole bunch of acoustical measurements, which I won't bore you with. Again, here's the GS9 combined with the Helix DSP Pro. Here's a little more specifications about the Helix product. It's true 32-bit processing. It can resolve to 96 kilohertz in the signal path. It's AK 32-bit converters. There's 8 channels. I use 7 of those 8. The manufacturer states that it has an 8-volt RMS output. It's actually more like 4, and it may be due to some of Gordon's modifications, which I'll get to in a minute. There's 0.25 dB incremental adjustments, which is very fine, plenty fine enough, I think. 30 bands of parametric equalization, which I'll show you later in the presentation. Time alignment down to 10 microseconds, and signal to noise in the analog realm of 110 dB. So as you can see, the goal of this processor is not to compromise the performance of the GS9, because the GS9 is in many ways superior to that of the processor, but in order to extract the most out of the GS9 and compensate for the acoustical environment of the bus, it's necessary to have that processing. And you'll see why in the upcoming slides. Here's a sort of a discussion about why the bus is so big. It comes down to this RT60, the reverberation time for the decay of sound to 1/1,000,000th of its original intensity. That's the 60, which stands for 60 dB. That's the equation, and basically it shows that the reverberation time is proportional to the volume and inversely proportional to the absorptivity of the surfaces inside the room. The bus uses principally 3/8 plywood, so there's a range of absorptivities. I strove for as much reflectivity as possible while using Helmholtz absorbers to specifically absorb problem frequencies. So I wanted to keep the room as lively as possible. So the bus, with its internal volume, proved that it could have a reverberation time between 0.08 and 3.1 seconds. So therefore I knew, by virtue of the internal volume, that I could achieve the desired reverberation time for favorable acoustics. Cars can't do that, regular cars. Here's a funny story. One of the aspects of doing the acoustics is I started with a bare van, and Brule and Kayer makes a handheld sound meter that measures reverberation time, and they were very kind to loan this meter to me. It's the 2270 handheld sound meter, and it characterizes reverberation by using an impulse response and then measuring the decay of sound over 4 seconds at the rate of 200 samples per second. So 800 data points were acquired over 2 seconds, and then I analyzed those data points using Excel and other software programs. But I had to figure out what an impulse response was. So I went to the Hallmark store where they sold balloons. And I went to the young lady and I said, I would like to order 50 balloons. And she said, you must be having quite a party. And I said, well, it's not quite like that. I'm going to take them home and pop them all. And she thought I was crazy. And so did my wife, because I said, baby, I'm going to the desert and I'm going to take these balloons and pop them inside the van. So I went to the middle of a dry lake bed in Anza Borrego, where it was supremely quiet. By the way, in the city where we live in San Diego, the noise background is like 30 to 40, sometimes even 50 dB. So it wasn't sufficient to let the sound decay far enough to get good data. So I had to go to the desert. And that day it would happen to be 103, but in particular, the sound meter showed me that my background noise was 17 dB. I mean, that's quiet. And of course, there may have been a little perspiration involved, and when it would drip, it would hit the floor of the van and go dink, and hit the sound meter, and so I couldn't even perspire because it would mess up the measurements. So anyway, audiophiles are passionate, and this demonstrates the extent to which some of us will go to try to achieve the result we're shooting for. Here's an example of basically how the reverberation measurements work. There's a impulse, which is the high level signal here, the balloon pop. Then the sound decays this is actually a logarithmic scale, so it's a semi-log plot, I think. I don't think it's a log-log plot. And the sound decays in a linear fashion on a semi-log plot, and then you extract this data over a 20 dB range, because your noise floor down here, you need to get this far away so that this hopefully linear decay can be fitted with a decay curve and reverberation time calculated. What typically happens is this noise floor is too high, and for instance, it's very difficult to get an RT60, and in other words, waiting for the sound to decay 60 dB. It's very difficult because of background noise. So they use the T20 technique and then extrapolate to T60 if you desire. Here are some of the Helmholtz absorbers that basically absorb the problem frequencies. And also there are draperies that are pleated, and these are to function also as diffusive and elements and quarter wavelength traps. So the Helmholtz absorbers some have narrow Q, most of them have a narrow Q at 102 Hertz. This one in the back is a broadband Helmholtz, so it has absorptive materials inside of it. And another interesting thing is, the back door could have been made very svelte with flowing lines and even contours and depths, but the purpose of the design was to, in fact, have as many odd diffusive surfaces as possible, so that particularly the sound would not, coming from the front, it would hit the back doors and then re-reflect to the front. So the goal was to avoid that as much as possible. Here's some more treatments. My one friend called me up and he goes, "What are those cheese grater panels? What do they do?" And I thought, that's a good way to describe those. They look like cheese graters. But these are binary amplitude diffusers. It's based off of a patent from RPG, this number. And these are computer designs. And the incident sound is reflected quite effectively in all directions upon striking this surface. And these are opposing panels on each side to prevent flutter echo, the sound going back and forth across the van. So, after craziness in the desert, multiple trips, hundreds of balloon pops, and dozens and dozens of Excel spreadsheets, and 2 years of fabrication, we come to this graph. So it took about 2.5 years to generate this graph. And this is the reverberation spectra from the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union. And the green shows the place where they think that good sound exists, and the red is areas obviously that are less desirable. So I worked very hard to get the bus within this region as much as possible. For grins, I looked up an old research paper on Robert Harley's room in New Mexico. This was built by Norm Varney, who is an astounding acoustician, and his work, of course, is highly respected. And this is Robert Harley's room in New Mexico, back when he had that. And I think sending this to Robert Harley is probably what got me the second review on the bus, because it showed that the bus is doing really, really quite well for a car. And particularly, these are other automobiles. This of course, they're so close to one another, it doesn't really matter, but each color represents a different car. One of them was a BMW X5, so that's a pretty big SUV with fairly high internal volume, but obviously nowhere close to the Magic Bus. And then the other car is my wife's Beetle, and then the other car is a Jaguar, I guess an XJ. So it just shows that cars are too dry, and you want more of an appropriate reverberation within the mid-range and, well, throughout the spectrum, actually. So this is probably the most noteworthy achievement of the bus and highly influential on the sound quality that's attained. This is the channel routing. I've shown this before. Basically, to maximize the benefit of the GS9, I've taken 3 of the output channels from the GS9, left, right, and subwoofer, and matrixed those into the front stage of the left channel, the right channels, front stage, and then the subwoofer. And then that was delivered to the analog output RCAs on the Helix, which then subsequently went into the amplifiers. This is my rolling laboratory, at least temporary laboratory. You see the bus outside and it's sort of pretty and open. Well, this is the disaster that is associated with tuning. There's a temporary desk that's anchored to the one wall, and another temporary desk that's anchored to the front armoire. And there's one computer to program the DSP, one computer to operate the audio interface, which sends the analog signal to the GS9. Then there's the microphone, which sends the signal, the measurement signal, back into the audio analyzer, and then subsequently into the Fuzz Measure Pro software. So it's quite an ordeal to get this set up and run these measurements. And typically, I would run 20 or 30 sine sweeps, maybe as many as 50 through each driver, and then analyze the results for both equalization and time alignment, and make refinements and iteratively approach the target curve. This is a surprising example of what it takes to tame the acoustics in the Magic Bus. Despite being one of the most favorable automotive environments, it still presents many challenges, and it requires a great deal of carefully and skillfully applied parametric equalization. And you can see from this graph, this is sort of the interesting graph here. This is the subwoofer, this is the door woofer, this is the mid-range on the pillars, which you've seen, the 5 1/4, and then this is the tweeter. Here's the right channel. And you can see the other challenge in the car is the asymmetry because you're sitting off to one side. And that's very difficult to compensate for. And again, the same for comparison. Again, here's the subwoofer. You can see it's exactly the same. See, it doesn't change because it's mono. Then here's the right door woofer. And you can see there's a different frequency correction required based on its location in the vehicle. And the same for the mid-range. Let's switch back quickly. So there is the left door woofer with that shape. And there's the right door woofer. So they're completely different based on their location in the van. And the goal is to make these adjustments so they sound acoustically the same. So that's the end result. And again, the tweeter is much different too. So there's a characteristic dip required here, which is different. See, there's a less of a dip there for sure. This one has more precise cuts to even out and smooth the sound, where this one seems to require less of that throughout this region. So it's very interesting. Here's the frequency response in aggregate. The black represents both channels playing. The blue represents the left channel, and the red represents the right channel. Now it would be very tempting to smooth this, and I could apply 1/3 octave smoothing and it would make it look really pretty. But I didn't want to do that, and in the interest of transparency, I wanted to use 1/24 octave smoothing, which is not a lot of smoothing. So it would reveal the difficulties encountered in this acoustical space more precisely, particularly sharp bumps or dips. But it's pretty amazing how the channels are matched, and this target curve is very important. This also was arrived from a technique called spatial averaging, where I did principal tuning in position 5, and then once I thought it was pretty close, I went to all these other positions and then averaged them. And this is a technique common in acoustical measurement. John Atkinson does it with his measurements of room measurements and things. Here's another sort of important and sort of pretty impressive graph, I think. The harmonic distortion. 1% or thereabouts is considered the threshold of audibility. And you can see that there's a couple places where it's a little challenged. For the most part though, on average, it's in this 0.5% range. Of course, you care about where the problem frequencies are more than, but look at what happens when both channels are playing. It's much lower, so basically it shows that the bus is achieving fairly good harmonic distortion measurements, and particularly in the bass. I mean, look at, you're down at 30 hertz at 1%. That's pretty remarkable by audiophile standards, from what I've read about other subwoofers and products and things. Impulse responses. It's classic fourth order Linkwitz-Riley acoustic. Basically, the tweeter fires, it overshoots. The mid-range fires, it overshoots. The woofers fire, and then they overshoot, and then finally the subwoofer. So this sequential sort of lining up of the squiggles, if you will, is essential to achieving proper frequency integration, at least in the frequency domain. And this sort of behavior in the time domain is necessary for when you're using the Linkwitz-Riley crossover topology. There are many sponsors in it. Sony, of course, is the principal sponsor, but there are many other companies who support the Magic Bus. we're very delighted to have them as supporting sponsors. I'll go through them one by one a little, quickly. Stinger makes electrical connections. Genesis makes the amplifiers. Norn makes audio connections, particularly for headphones. Radix is the power wire. Custom Autobody did all of the paint work in the Magic Bus. Kimber Cable and WBT provides all of the wiring, signal carrying wiring in the bus. Excess Power provides the batteries, both the engine starting battery and the auxiliary battery. Bilstein shock absorbers, Cascade Audio damping materials, Rexroth aluminum framing in the back. The Amp Doctor did all the mods for the DSP and the amplifiers. Blueport Jazz has been an important supporter of the bus with music and introductions to really great musicians. Dynaudio, of course, are the speakers used all throughout the bus. And SMC Audio, special shout out to Steve McCormack from SMC Audio, who's here in the audience. And his particular contribution to the bus is the mentorship he's given me through all the years, teaching me what really matters in audio, how not to worry about things I shouldn't and focus on the things that I should. And going back to this sort of thing here, he's taught me most of all that measurements are essential to excellent performance of an audio system. But given Steve's 30-some years of experience in the industry, he also taught me to trust my ears. And when he says that to me, I go, why should I? Because I have your ears to trust. So I don't trust my ears, I trust Steve's ears. And when you hear the Magic Bus and you hear the smoothness and the detail and the articulation, it was Steve McCormack who came in after I had done these technical measurements, and he sat in the front seat and I sat in the back with the laptop, and he barked out orders to make adjustments to the DSP, and that's what I did. And truly, the level that Steve had taken the system from where it was with good technical measurements, he took it to a level where it's musically involving and the artistic expression of the music is particularly wonderful. And I thank Steve immensely for his contribution.
And you're welcome.
Thank you. And we're got a few conclusions. The version 12 is available for download now, and that allows all of owners of the GS9 to play 11.2 DSD like we did here at the show. The GS9 is essentially, it's taken the industry by storm. All of the competitors are using it, all of the enthusiasts. It is the source unit to use if you're serious about sound. And the Magic Bus, hopefully, will continue to drive state of the art and keep it evolving. So the next section of the presentation, we have 8 minutes left. I was hoping to have more, but thank you for listening. We're going to open it up to questions either to Hiro-san or to myself that you may have about the Magic Bus. And we would invite some questions now. Yes, sir.
In the design, were there any surprises where, for example, you thought as a factor was going to be a really important factor and it just wasn't? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The question was any factor that I thought that was important,
you thought
but
would
wasn't.
be important, like dimension or reflectivity or diffusion, that you, as you tested it more and more, it was in effect less significant than you thought it would be.
No, I think the opposite was almost always true. That problems I encountered were unexpected rather than expected. Yeah, such is life, right? You think you know what you're doing and then something else happens. Yes, Eric.
Question for Hiro-san.
Sure, please
I was
come.
wondering what the direction was for Sony to tackle a car environment to make such a high quality source unit in a car environment?
Car wire?
The car environment.
Car
So,
environment.
yeah, why did Sony devote so many resources to creating such a product?
You're talking about not only car industry but also home, you mean?
No, just car in particular. So what was the direction for Sony, the Sony GS9?
Actually, the intention we have developed the GS9 is that we like to give the premium audio products, not only actually including Sony. And before we launched the RS6 GS9, actually Sony and the competitors, it's a kind of the high-end market is gradually like a decreasing. So that's why. But actually, Sony leads the high-resolution industry right now, not only car but also home as well. So really our intention, we have started to develop the RS6 GX9. We like to give the expand more premium and high-end car audio high-end industry, and I'd like to give them present the any opportunity for all customers with like a split optimum sound environment in the car. This is the basic of our starting point of developing the RSHX9. It makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Steve?
Yeah, you said there's now a number of even larger vehicles on the market that might actually make a better platform for an audio vehicle. So I'm wondering when we're going to see the next iteration of the
Wow. You know, I'm advancing in age, and I probably have one car left in me.
Oh, yeah?
As long as my wife will stick with me through another car, if that were to happen. But it would be nice to take everything that we've learned from this one and propel it into another platform. I have many ideas about innovative designs, but they would be extremely expensive and time consuming.
Well, I think Sony probably has the resources to make
I hope so. I would like to try as much as possible. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Johnny, do you ever use like a portable tape machine like a Naga or something like that just to play pure analog?
No, I haven't.
Just wondered, has there been any questions about that ever before as to why? Or no one's ever asked?
No one's ever asked, but
Now
you
that
know,
I have, what do you say?
I'm game for anything
Okay.
original and fun.
Just wondering.
Right.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question, man.
Yes, sir.
Oh, hey, how you doing?
So I think you're in a blended environment where you've got a DSP source, but you're using PCM for all the acoustic changes. Is there any reality at all, or any possibility at all of doing the acoustic changes in a DSP type environment? Or is that just physically impossible because of the structure of the way DSP is set up?
I'm not sure I understand your
So-
question.
Okay, so my source is DSP, I'm coming out. Right now, you're taking analog off the source, and then you're running it into a PCM device that's basically, looks like a big digital signal processing unit
Mhm.
that's working in a PCM type mode.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, could you come directly out of DSP and do, in effect, all the manipulation in DSP, do all the signal processing, the timing, and the frequency equalization, and things like that? Or is it
Is
just-
your question, do you mean keep it in the DSD realm?
Everything in DSP, a little way, all the way till you get to the amplifier stage.
You mean DSD?
DSD,
or-
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
Too many alphabets.
yeah, that's not available at this time.
Okay.
Really, the DSP industry has to catch up to the GS9. And the other thing is, you know, the correction, the DSP is, you know, sort of an undesirable thing. You wish you had a room that didn't need it, but the car needs it. So until the DSP manufacturers can catch up with higher resolutions and other ways to maintain the beautiful signal integrity of the GS9, we're gonna have to wait. Yes, sir.
What about MQA, and have you looked at the speaker for correction for their new unit?
I have not, and I'm fascinated with MQA, of course, because we were at the LA Audio Society debut of that at Sunil's place, and yeah, that was fascinating, and I would be interested.
Actually, Sony, back in 1989, came out with a preamp called the TAE 1000 ESD that did do processing in the DSP for EQ and filtering and the whole bit. So it is possible, they just don't have the chips right now, I guess, to do it.
Yeah, that was before my time, actually.
Not before mine, I'm afraid.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're really hopeful that DSP will take off, and yeah.
Well, these were all analog inputs first, and then they were converted. But, you know, obviously now with DSD, that's a little bit different process.
Sure. And, you know, a future iteration, a new design, maybe if I made a center drive system, I could accomplish much of what's necessary in the analog realm and, you know, maybe sidestep some of the DSP, maybe keep the signal path more pure. So those would be options, creative options if they were to come to pass. Anything else? I think we're out of time. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Heroes. Congratulations.